wonderful introduction. I so appreciate that. Um, so it is so wonderful to be here, and good morning to all of you. And for us, I'm actually based in Los Angeles, California, and it's nighttime. Just got the kids to bed, and I was excited, really excited that mainly that they're sleeping, but also to be here with you. So I'm going to share my screen, and I want to start to provide some of the latest research and thinking around flow as it relates to work and performance in our professional lives, but it's also transferable more holistically into our lives, generally speaking. And also, we'll talk a little bit about the impact of AI and potential flow experiences as well, and the implications and what the future might hold there for better and for worse. So, without further ado, I will share my screen and let's dive into it. So, as mentioned, my just a little bit about my own journey. Um, I started my career really when I went to university at University of Michigan, where I met Dr. Christopher Peterson. And I walked into, he's one of the preeminent founders of positive psychology. And the first three words he used when we walked into that class was other people matter. And that the research of positive psychology up to that point could be summed up into those three words: the importance of relationships, both personally and professionally, into creating what's called the good life, as you would say. And then I really fell in love with that, with the field starting then. And I started to explore what I wanted to do with my life. And when I found out that Dr. Csikszentmihalyi was a researcher and a professor at Claremont, that was it for me. And so I studied with him for really most of the 2010s, and it was one of the greatest honors of my life. So a lot of what our company does now, which is called the Venn Collective, is bringing flow-based principles into organizations, both from a large-scale systems perspective and also an individual daily experience perspective. And we work very heavily in the sports industry. So we work with a lot of teams in the United States, such as the LA Lakers and the New York Yankees, and we work with other entertainment firms as well, such as Fox Entertainment or Disney and Hulu. And so these are my two children. This is Dr. Donaldson and my recent book that came out, Flow 2.0, which I'll be talking a little bit more about in today's talk. So if you think about the current state that we often work and live in today, and why flow, in my opinion, is more important than ever before, is because so many of us operate in what's called time confetti. And so if you think about the concept of confetti, where it's these tiny bits of paper that are fragments falling from the sky. Now think about that in the context of how we spend our time and how we invest our attention. So every time we try and engage in one thing, there are all of these little bits of stimuli and information that are trying to distract us from what we're trying to do and say, hey, look over here. We are in an attention economy. So every time we check our phones, there's going to be social media notifications, news notifications, probably emails, texts, missed calls, transcribed voicemails. There's going to be all of these bits of confetti that are going to take us away from our flow state and say, hey, invest your attention over here. Trying to enter a flow state in this climate has never been more difficult in many ways. And so if you think about what people's calendars look like at work, there's so much about like our daily structure that is also designed to take us out of flow. And if you look at these different like calendar holds, it's like these days are very choppy. And like you're maybe in a 30-minute meeting here and a 40-minute meeting here and 20 minutes here. And by the end of these days, people feel very busy, but not necessarily the right type of busy. It's more of a draining busy. It's not an energizing busy. And so, by the way, if you don't mind muting yourself, I think we got some background noise. That would be great. Thank you. And so what we're trying to accomplish with our work is try to create the type of busy that's energizing, where we find that state of flow more consistently, where we get out of time confetti. And so trying to move out of this type of way we spend our time, where even if you take 1 hour of leisure time, let's say we're trying to watch a television show at night and we're trying to spend an hour on that, but we have our phones in front of us and we get all of these little bits of stimuli coming at us, and when we operate in that type of confetti, in the course of 1 hour, you might get a total of 21 pieces of confetti. And if you extrapolate that over time, that's over an hour a day. It's a full work day a week of 8.6 hours per week. And then if you extrapolate that over the course of a year, it's 17 days just in that state of distraction, not to mention the time it takes to invest ourselves back into what we were trying to do in the first place. So, flow, the state of complete absorption and optimal experience, the opposite of time confetti. And as someone who works a lot in sports, I really, really like this quote from NBA basketball player Steph Curry, where he says it's the one time that everything kind of goes on autopilot. And there's synergy with everything that you're trying to do. Even your intentions are then validated by the atmosphere around you, where it seems like everything else is going right at the same time. You kind of get lost in that moment. Really, when we are in flow, it is the best experiences of our lives. It's hard work to be in flow, whether it's what we're on our own or with others. Flow is everywhere. Flow is attainable to us. We just have to know how to access it and understand ourselves well enough to know what flow might look like for us. So I'm just curious, if you don't mind sharing in the chat box, what gets you into flow? Whether it's professionally, personally, academically, whatever comes to mind. Could you please share in the chat box, like, what is a flow activity for you? I just love to see what they are for each of us. Kathy, gardening. Oh, that's wonderful. Swimming, meditation, painting, Bharatanatyam, writing, creating, reading. That's great. Being with nature, counseling, listening to music, reading, being outdoors, movement, dancing. Okay. So as you can see from this varied list, for each of us, it's going to be different. Some of us are more using our minds, where maybe reading, meditation. Some are maybe may be using our bodies, whether it's like hiking, running. And some of us, it's more maybe social. Maybe it's being with other people or having deep conversations. Or maybe it's more auditory, whether it's music. Maybe it's more tactile, whether it's painting, petting animals. So there's so many one of the most amazing things about flow is that it's not one size fits all, and there's endless possibilities. There's the ones that we know of already, but I'm sure there's a lot of other opportunities that we don't even realize exist for us to find flow. And it's just about understanding how to unlock it for ourselves. And especially in a work environment, in a professional environment, what are the sort of conditions that need to be in place for us? As some of the research develops in the neuroscience of flow, one thing that we are finding is that there's something called transient hypofrontality, and it's the temporary deactivation of the prefrontal cortex. So the area of our brain where we are self-conscious, where we might be very critical of ourselves, where we naturally get anxious, and we're always just so aware of ourselves, it deactivates. It allows us to lose ourselves and become one with the activity, with the flow task at hand. And so, for example, when we're on Zoom or FaceTime and we find ourselves looking at ourselves and like how we're coming across, that goes away when we are in flow. And the research shows that we don't spend more than 3 minutes on one thing before getting distracted by something else. And some of the latest research is showing that's even going down to 2 minutes. And with today's youth and how fragmented they are, again, we are now in a climate where everything is sort of designed to be against flow. So if you take Dr. Csikszentmihalyi's, here he is, in some of the original flow studies, and when he researched painters, surgeons, dancers, rock climbers at the top of their field, really trying to understand what are the commonalities between their experiences that allows them to perform at their best. And they would use this analogy of like when they were fully locked in, it was like they were flowing, like flowing down a river. Everything just kind of, but it was almost like a sense of autopilot where they were investing all of their mind, body, spirit, working hard, but it didn't feel like that. It almost felt effortless in the moment, even though they were investing so much. So that's why he coined the term flow. So as I talk about these preconditions of flow, I am going to frame them in the context of more of our work life. Okay, so we can get a little bit of a sense of what this looks like in our work life more, and then also this can be translated, of course, to professionally too. But the preconditions of flow. So if you think about having a clear goal, one of the reasons, for example, in sports, flow is so attainable is because people always have a clear goal. They're trying to make a basket, score a goal, win a game, win a championship. Goals individually and collectively are always pretty clear. In our professional lives, we often don't have clear goals. We don't necessarily approach a day understanding what are the things I want to accomplish today, or this week, what are the things I want to accomplish this week? And then also maybe in the course of 6 months to a year, what are the clear goals we're trying to accomplish and how our micro goals are matched up with our macro goals. When we don't have a clear goal, it is hard to invest our full attention in something because we don't have that focus of where we're trying to go. So, number two, once we have having a clear goal is essential. And then we need to be receiving immediate feedback when we are trying to enter a state of flow. So if you think about feedback in the context of work, we often think about receiving feedback from a manager, someone above us in the hierarchy. But when we are in flow, we are getting feedback from the task at hand, from the activity at hand. So as an example, when I, as someone who runs my own business, I am not necessarily receiving feedback from an individual above me. So I have to find ways to give myself feedback. So when I, for example, submit a proposal to a client and it is approved, and I know that work is moving forward, that goes in one folder called accepted client proposals. And I study those to try to find the commonalities of what worked well and what those proposals have in common. So then I can start to give myself feedback when I work on proposals in the future. I know the things I'm looking for. I know whether I'm making the right type of progress or the wrong type of progress. So it's very essential to be able to know, are we on the right track or not, and be able to give that to ourselves. And then having a sense of autonomy. So there's a lot of research that both flow related and outside of flow is that one of the most motivating factors for people to succeed at work is having a sense of autonomy. They not want to know where they're going, but they want freedom on how to get there. We do not want to be told and micromanage every step of the way how we should be doing every single small thing. If we have like a box that we're playing in, and like we know how to operate within that box and we have freedom and we're empowered to do so, it is much more flow conducive. So then one of the most, like, I would say, well-known findings from Dr. Csikszentmihalyi's original studies is having the balance between skill and challenge. At work, oftentimes we end up doing repetitive tasks again and again and again. And what ends up happening is we continuously grow our skill sets. Challenge stays the same, and it's hard to enter flow. On the reverse side, sometimes some organizations will say, they'll use the expression like, we throw our people into the deep end. And basically, they create challenges for them that are greater than the skill they have. They don't necessarily have the support yet. They might have them, as an example, present to a client without having the requisite skills to be able to succeed in that situation. That's very anxiety provoking. So in order to achieve flow at work, we have to have the requisite skills and the requisite support from our managers and from our leaders in order to remain in that flow channel. When we are in flow, when we have that balance between skill and challenge, that's what ends up creating mastery and greatness in whatever it is we're trying to achieve. Because if, as an example, if any of us play like a video game, once you beat one level of a game, you're not going to say, okay, that's great. I will play that level again and again and again. You naturally want to progress to the next level. And like our work is the same. Whenever we master a new skill, we naturally want to be challenged with something a little more and a little more. And then eventually we become masters in our craft. So we become masters of our craft because that's naturally motivating for us to continue to seek out greater and greater challenge. So I want us to play a brief, one of my favorite American little games is Where's Waldo? So basically, the social distancing edition, this is an example of our visual skill being greater than the challenge. So for those of us unfamiliar with this game, it's basically this guy in the red striped shirt. We have to find him in the image. He's right here. We don't even have to think about it. What about this one? If I were to say, where is Waldo in this image? I could have you stare at this for a half an hour and we wouldn't find him. The image is blurry. There's too many people. We don't have the visual skill to match the challenge. This is not an engaging exercise. But what if I were to say, where's Waldo in this picture? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. And when you find him, put in a chat box that you found him. Okay, looks like we've got some folks that found him. I'm going to give everyone 10 more seconds. There he is. He's right here. Okay, so this version, I always like to watch people's faces when I put this slide up. The way people lean in and automatically engage with this image compared to the other two shows us that when we feel like there's a challenge ahead of us, a challenge in front of us that we think we can solve, we want to solve it. It's challenging enough to engage us. It's not too challenging where it's not worth it or it would make us anxious. We want our activities and our work to feel like more like this. This is like that sweet spot of skill and challenge for us. And ultimately, one of the research findings that I really am a big fan of is that, as I mentioned, flow is not one size fits all. Our personality has a big impact on our ability, on what is flow for us. So let me give you an example of personality differences here. Introverts, those of us that aren't quite as gregarious or necessarily as social, find flow in different ways than those of us who are more extroverted. So introverts more often than not, will find flow more quickly via individual activities or exercises, via maybe things like reading, writing, or having time to reflect on an idea. That will be more flow conducive. Whereas if our natural tendency is to want to converse and be with others, and we're more extroverted, we will probably be more likely to find flow via social activities. And a group flow might be more attainable to us. When there are work teams that are a mix of introverts and extroverts, we will often make the assumption that other people on the team will find flow in the same ways that we will. So if we want to discuss an idea and I'm an extrovert, I might just assume everybody's going to want to discuss this idea with me. Whereas there's some folks on our team that might want time to think about this idea and reflect on it before having a conversation with others about it. So we have to be very aware that our flow, what might not be the same as others' flow. And by the way, I do see some questions in the chat, and I will come back to those. I don't want you to think I'm ignoring them. So if you see the factors that influence our flow preferences, as I mentioned, there's personality, but there's also our life circumstances. So whether we work in an office or we work at home, whether we have small children or maybe we live alone, those circumstances, our work environment, maybe some of us prefer to have headphones in and listen to music. Some people like to hear the noise around us. This in the middle between personality and our circumstances, that will influence our flow. So now I want to ask everybody again. Can you share with me in the chat box where you find what professional activities give you a sense of flow in a work setting, in a work or academic setting? Where do you find flow? And share with me in the chat box. Counseling, teaching, strategizing. Huh. I love how much I'm seeing teaching here. I'm going to ask more about that in a few minutes. Like, what about teaching? Which is more important, character or personality? Huh. I don't think there's a straight answer to that. I think they're both probably playing a very important role. So, okay. And so I want to, for those of us who said, by the way, if we don't mind muting ourselves, thank you. For those of us who said teaching, I bet that there's different reasons for all of us. Like maybe for some of us, it's when we are sharing information and we're the ones sharing our expertise. Maybe for some of us, it means when the class is conversing with one another. So there's going to be different flow within even the same activity. I think we have a lot of background noise. I think Dr. Karana, if you don't mind muting yourself. Okay. So another one of my favorite research findings is that flow is contagious, which means that my flow is going to impact your flow if we are working together. So when we show up to any virtual meeting, as an example, if I am engaged, I am present, I'm making eye contact, I'm asking you questions, you are going to be far more likely to be engaged with me. That engagement we share with each other is going to propel both of us to be far more likely to enter flow together. Because when we match each other's engagement and presence and attention, that's when we can create new ideas together and create something together that maybe didn't exist before. On the flip side, if I show up, I'm distracted, I'm checking my phone, I'm clearly not looking, I'm not looking at the screen, I ask you to repeat yourself, maybe my camera's off, you are more likely to also mimic those behaviors. It's human nature. It will be almost impossible to find flow in that type of setting. So remember, we don't just have flow, it shouldn't be just thought of as in a silo where it's just us. We have to keep in mind that the energy and attention that we bring to our interactions will also impact the flow of the other person that we are interacting with, that we are working with. So it's easy to forget that if we have a lot of meetings or if we have a lot of classes we're teaching or interacting with a lot of students, faculty, et cetera. But we always need to remember that we can always impact the flow of not just ourselves, but with others via the amount of attention and energy and investment that we bring. I often talk about something called a wake, where if you think about we're driving a speedboat and you're always looking forward, there's always something, there's a ripple effect, a wake happening behind us. We don't often remember that or realize that all of our actions and behaviors throughout the day are creating a ripple effect. When we're always looking forward and we're really busy or we're in that confetti, it can be difficult to remember the impact that we're making, the wake that's going on behind us. And for those of us who are teaching and have students, that every time we are teaching a class and interacting with our students, we are impacting their day. We're impacting their week, their life, and that we're always creating this ripple effect. And so ultimately, the more that we are intentionally trying to find flow in our interactions, the more likely those that we interact with will find flow as well. So I want to talk for a couple of minutes about group flow and then a little bit about looking forward from a technological standpoint. And then I want to take some questions. But the factors of collective flow. So collective flow really meaning that flow that's experienced with other people, whether it's a sports team, whether it's a work team, a group project, whenever you are directly interacting and working with other people towards a common goal, that is an opportunity for collective flow. And the conditions there is that instead of having individual goal, we need to have a shared goal. So one of the things we do with organizations when we're setting an organizational mission statement, which is like who we are, why we exist, but we can't just stop there. With every department that we work with, we also want them to have their own shared goal, what they're all trying to achieve, and how it ties to the organizational goal. Our our goals are like a web. We have to have individual goals that are tied to our team's goals, that are tied to the department's goals, that are tied to the organization's goals. If one of those things loses its thread to the others, then it's harder to find collective flow because we're not all on the same page. So it's very important that we have that shared goal. And then we need to be able to have what we call close listening. Listening, I think, is becoming a lost art in many, many ways. It has become more reliant on technology. But not listening, close listening means going beyond just listening to respond. It means coming up with ways to make the conversation deeper, opening it up to new ideas. So, like, not just responding with what's coming to mind as they're halfway through a sentence, but asking a thoughtful question to have them go deeper. So, for example, instead of just listening to respond, if we come up with like what's an open-ended question that can expand this conversation, that's a way that can really show the person that we really heard you, we're interested, and we want to keep going. And then, of course, we need to be completely concentrated as a group. And then we have to blend our egos. And this is a really, really difficult one because in high performing organizations, high performing teams, no doubt there's going to be egos. We have to be able to give ourselves to the collective goal, to give ourselves to something beyond ourselves. When we are there for self-interest, flow will be nearly impossible because ultimately we have goals that are not aligned with what we're trying to collectively achieve. Okay. And then, so within our shared goal, we need to have clear roles. So what is my role? So even within a meeting, for example, I hear all the time from clients, like, I get invited to all these meetings. I don't even know why I'm there. Are you there just to listen? Are you there to contribute? Are you there to take notes? Are you there to come up with a decision, to come up with the action plan? We need to, even within the micro environment of a meeting, what are each individual role? Because even if you don't have anything to contribute vocally, you might be very engaged in the meeting because you know what you're trying to achieve, what you're supposed to be contributing. Then for shared flow, for collective flow, we need to have familiarity with the other folks on our team. What this means is that we need to understand what makes the others tick. We need to understand, like, are they more detail oriented? Are they more big picture oriented? Hi, sorry. I think Ashima, do you mind muting yourself? Thank you. We need to know, like, for example, like what is going to get someone else on our team to meet them where they are so they can find their flow. If I'm an extrovert and I know someone's an introvert, I might send them in a meeting agenda ahead of time and say, like, hey, review this. I'm going to send this to you in advance so you can actually take your time to review it and then come to the table with your ideas. Having that type of familiarity with others is so flow conducive. And then we want to always keep things moving forward. We never want to stifle someone's ideas too early. We can disagree, but we don't necessarily want to say, like, that was a bad idea. We're not going with that. We want someone, when they have an idea, even if it's not the idea we go with, to make them feel that the idea was welcome. It was, and like that we're glad they shared it out loud. And maybe it helps us like formulate the idea we end up going with, even if we don't use their original idea. So we want to create the safety that everyone always feels comfortable to share and that we keep things moving forward. And then ultimately, what's an interesting finding is that there needs to be potential for failure, which means that like there needs to be an urgency and stakes to the situation. If we bring this in the context of like our daily work, something as simple as a deadline. We have only 3 days to get this done, as an example, or our deadline is 12 p.m. on Friday. And if we don't get it done by then, it's considered late and we're not going to get the project. Or this paper's due Wednesday at midnight. Whatever it is, to creating that sense of urgency gets people locked in a way that helps them achieve flow. And so even how we time meetings is important. If you give people an hour to discuss something that should only take 30 minutes, there's not going to be a sense of urgency we need. So be very thoughtful and intentional around how long we even set for every interaction, every meeting, because if we have the right amount of urgency, that allows us to stay focused. So a few things, some research strategies from that I shared, we share in Flow 2.0, limit the culprits of time confetti. So when you are when you are setting up your day, try and what we call chunk similar meetings together. When I work with clients, we don't want to have a strategy meeting at 9 a.m., a one-on-one with an employee at 9:30, a client meeting at 10. We want to have meetings, for example, we'd like 3 meetings in a row to feel similar to each other. Maybe we have all of our one-on-ones with our team members back to back to back because we're using our brain in a similar way. And it kind of allows us not to be in that confetti state too much. Then if we can chunk similar tasks or meetings together. So one, as an example, what I tell clients is like, instead of responding to every email as it comes in, it's better to wait for 3 or 4 to pile up and then respond to all 4 or all 3 or 4 at the same time. Because if you always are distracting yourself to respond to an email one at a time, you are just begging to be in confetti, at that state of time confetti all day long. So it's important how we structure our time. And then, as I mentioned, flow being contagious, personality and preferences impacting individual flow and collective flow. We want to create those mechanisms for immediate feedback. So, for example, like how do we know where we're making the right type of progress or the wrong type of progress? And every time we have time to work on something, a micro work session. Let's say it's 90 minutes. Know exactly what you want to accomplish. Is it write 3 pages? Is it grade 10 papers? Instead of saying, I'm going to take 90 minutes and I'm going to work on this thing, say by the end of this 90 minutes, I will have done X. It is much more, having that clear of a goal allows us to focus in on that 90 minutes in a much different way than I'm going to make some progress on something. Know what you're trying to achieve within that 90 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours. And then one more thing that is I want to share with you around some of this research is something that's become very important for folks is having what we call our pre-flow rituals. So things that are signal to our brain, it's time to get to work. It's time to focus. So whether that means having a cup of coffee, putting on a certain type of playlist, walking your dog, meditating, something that you do that you want, that you know that after you do that thing, your brain's going to be ready or your body's going to be ready to enter flow. Also, seek flow outside of your professional life. The more you do the things that get you in flow, that energize you outside of work, it's correlated with finding flow at work. If we spend time outside of work in confetti and just distracting ourselves or scrolling social media, we're going to be more exhausted and drained to find flow at work. And if our at work days are very distracted and fragmented, it's going to be exhausting to come home and try to actually spend that time in a flow conducive way in our personal life. So as we look forward, the future of flow in the age of AI, I want to share some initial thinking here. There is a lot of, I think, flow conducive areas that AI can bring, and there's a lot of also pitfalls that we have to watch out for. So what are the potential for flow as it relates to AI? Here's a few things that are some of the early thinking here. But if it can reduce cognitive load and repetitive tasks, that's one thing we know it can do. So some things that would feel very administrative that might be not challenging enough for us at this point, it can reduce that. Ideally, that would free us up to focus on more of the strategic or cognitively challenging tasks that would get us into flow. Another thing it can do that we're finding is that it can analyze your performance, your strengths, and your preferences, and then provide recommendations for an optimal skill challenge balance, help you approach your tasks in a flow conducive way with the right prompts, and provide real-time immediate feedback. submit our work product and ask specific questions on whether we're making the right or wrong type of progress depending on our goals. It can recommend environmental adjustments, light, noise, etc., based on our preferences. And if used correctly and used thoughtfully, it can accelerate collective flow. So helping with some of the administrative things that get people together, such as calendar syncing or clarifying shared goals. So there's potential here. On the flip side, if we are over automating, it can cause skill erosion. So a lot of flow is developing and thoughtfully developing skills to match challenges, as we discussed. If we are eroding those skills and letting something else just complete tasks for us too often, and we lose our ability to critical think, then we won't be finding flow with AI because we'll just be not even challenging our mind at all. We'll just hand it everything to do. And then also, AI has the potential to provide us with so much information and so many options that it can cause information overload. And then also, if we're not thoughtful in how we use it, it might provide recommendations that aren't correct for us or our situation or our environment or our company. So we have to be careful of that. And then as we hand over more and more to it, we might not have as much autonomy. Our environment, our work, our organizations, we might just use it to such an extent that we don't even feel like we have control over how something gets done. We will think that AI will just take the place of any way we would have done it before. We'll just ask AI to take it on for us. And then, of course, it can cause less connection with others. As AI takes on more work, we might not see the need as much for like getting together to share ideas. We might just think it's easier to just let AI come up with the ideas. So ultimately, there's kind of these two diverging paths that we can take with flow and AI. A lot of it's going to come down to intention. So we can, and I've had success finding flow with using AI as a tool if we are being thoughtful and intentional about it. I have personally experienced firsthand how I can do these things, and I have personally experienced firsthand how I can do these things on the right. When I am purposefully thinking about, I want this tool to enhance my ability to experience flow today, and I do that self-talk before, I'm more able to have it be these things on the left. When I'm exhausted or just burnt out, and I'm just like I'm just wanting to get something done, I can see myself leaning more into just having over automating and having it do too much. So it is going to require so much thought and intention from all of us, not just for ourselves, but for our colleagues and our students. We need to do really deep thinking on how do we use it in the right way, because it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So how can we responsibly think about it for it to enhance flow for folks? Once we have an idea for ourselves and maybe for our classroom or whatever it is we do for a living, and then we want to share those ideas and bring them into the conversation. And one thing I think is really interesting about where we are in the AI world is that everyone is having their own unique experiences with it, and we're all learning together. None of us are just decades-long experts in AI, right? It's our popular usage of it is quite new. So we need to be learning together. And I think the more we sort of hide it from each other and sort of use it in the background, and then when we're meeting with others, we pretend we don't use it, it's not helping anyone. We need to be co-learning together, sharing our outputs together so we can be learning best practices, and then therefore kind of like create a shared usage in a way that can help us all feel more closely connected together because we're talking about it, but also using it in the right ways. So I have hope for it, obviously concern as well, but I think that it's not all doom and gloom if we are intentional about our use. So with that, I would like to pause, or I'm going to stop the formal part and take any questions that folks have. And you can ask out loud or in the chat. And how do we usually do this? Should I go through the chat box questions or do we share them out loud? Is there like a best practice for questions?
You might pick up the key ones in the chat while people are thinking of things, and then they can raise their hands when they have a question for you.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Professor Singh. So I'm going to go, is intentionality enough for tools such as AI meeting summary tools to not cause skill? Um, I think it's too early to say. I'm looking at Sarah's question. So I think we have to start with intentionality, but I think ultimately we all have enough experience without AI to have it be a supplement to what we do. I'm mostly concerned about skill erosion and lack of critical thinking for like the young folks and like people in their teens and 20s that are really going to be using this in a way that like they won't have known anything else. So that's something that I'm more concerned about. And okay, so I'm looking at Rejul Aurora's question. Is it easier for sports folks to achieve flow compared to knowledge workers, and why? Um, generally speaking, it is easier for athletes because more of the flow components are naturally baked into sports than they are to knowledge work. So, for example, clear goals. Did I make a shot or I miss a shot if I'm a basketball player? Uh, Immediate feedback. Did it hit the front of the rim? I need to bend my knees more. Did it hit the back of the rim? Maybe I need to shoot it a little, not put as much, you know, not shoot it as hard. So there's all of these like little things that are baked into sports that allow us to achieve flow. Whereas knowledge work, there's a lot more ambiguity in our day and a lot less connectivity with coworkers as opposed to having teammates on a court or a field. So yeah, there's just there's less natural flow, conducive parts of our environment. Um, okay, and then I'm gonna does anybody want to raise their hand? And I want to get to a few folks. Aliyah, sorry, I don't know if I said your name right.
No worries. Dr. Dubin, this is so awesome. I can't tell you how much I love this frame and how I can't wait to go by and read 4.2.0. Quick question. So when you talk about the goal, I am wondering if you can elongate the goal. I'm just going to give you a quick example. So I do interim leadership stints for a living. And I find from this framework that I am often in flow during those engagements. So I have a very clear goal. I have a lot of the indicators, feedback that you suggest in the frame. The only thing is that my goal is over a year. So there may be days that are harder days, but when they're hard, it's usually an indicator of and feedback that I'm still on the right track. Is that even possible? Or when you think of flow, are you thinking of shorter term conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a great question. And you absolutely longer term goals can be extremely flow conducive and allow us to remain focused on something more long term. And I'll give you the example of Dr. Donaldson and I writing this book. It was a long term goal is to finish the chapters of the book. But what's important for a long-term goal to remain like conducive for flow is you have all of these short-term goals along the way that are tied to the long-term goal. So the natural example is if you're trying to finish a book, you have your individual chapters, right? And so each individual chapter and finishing that draft is a micro goal within the macro goal of finishing a book. So I think having macro goals that are 1 year, 3 years, 5 years away can really keep us focused as long as we have micro goals on a weekly, monthly basis that are tied to reaching whatever that is over the year-long period. Could we go to Badri?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Actually, your session was really inspiring. We can see that this is really Flow 2.0 because before your session, I was knowing more about that the challenge and interest create flow, and then you talked about group flow. So really inspiring and insightful. My question is that what can be the ideas for Flow 3.0? Like what are the new research areas where we should focus now in flow basically?
That's such a good question. I mean, I think at the first thing coming to mind is of course like flow with AI is going to be just a massive area of interest and study. But I think the second piece of that is that what AI looks like today is going to be very different than what it looks like a year from now. So one concern I have is that like any research that is getting worked on with Flow and AI today, by the time that's going to get published, AI is going to look different. So we have to we have to stay very on top of the technology and know that like maybe today it's like entering prompts and getting, responses, but in a few years from now, maybe it won't be like it'll be far less about typing and we'll have all of the information in our brains or a chip in our, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. But I just think that the technology is going to progress at such a fast pace. We have to be on top of that. And then I think on the flip side of that, Flow 3.0, I think there's going to be almost like a back to basics of what are the things in our life where we just want to put everything of like all technology completely away and just really be one with nature or one with another person. And so I think there's almost going to be like a push to like strip away all of these like gadgets and ways that can supplement flow with how we work and live, and like let's just get away from all that. So I think there'll be kind of those two paths happening. But it's an definitely interesting question. Okay, next,
Thank you,
Sri. You're welcome. Srihari, I'm sorry if I didn't say your name right.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Professor Matt. It was very insightful, actually. The inputs were very value adding in nature. All I wanted to figure out was, since you said that sports professionals are more likely to experience a flow state, since Reiki Foundation is aligned with all frontline education institutions in many countries, all I wanted to figure out was how can we gamify the learning process so that learners also will experience that flow state? Do you think gamification of learning will enable the learners also to experience the same flow state which sports personnel also experience?
I do think so. I think there's definitely research that gamifying tasks is very flow conducive. So allowing someone, for example, as they progress on a learning journey, to go from like a level 1 or a level 2 and receive certifications and feedback that they're making progress. That is very, very, very smart to do, as opposed to just like say, hey, here's the topics you need to learn. So as much as we can break learning down into components where every time someone levels up in one area, they know it, it's clear, they receive that feedback, and then they know they're progressing to a new level of learning. That is such a valuable way to try to engage learners and have them be in flow. So
it's not just about the process and progress. It is also about the output and outcome, which can be influenced through this gamification process.
Yeah. I think like I'd love to actually talk more about this. If you're welcome to reach out to me. And I'm gonna actually, if anybody wants to send me an email, I just put my email in the chat box. And I think there's ways that the output of a learning journey that we're actually thinking about right now as far as the work that we're doing. And so send me a note and we can talk more about this, okay, if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think I saw this question a couple of times, but what kind of work do you do for sports clients? So just as when we work with sports organizations, we do a lot with the business side of sports. So all of the, for example, like for the Los Angeles Lakers, we work with all of the corporate teams, such as marketing, ticket sales, corporate sponsorships, but also basketball operations, so the front office. And we do a lot of leadership development, team building, offsites, and team development to help them create more flow conducive ways of working together that helps them put the organization and the systems of it together in a way that helps them get the right players, establish the culture they want to have from the top down to allow them to succeed. So it's a lot of, I would say, culture, leadership, and team development is what our focuses are. Any other questions before? I know we only got another minute. Any other questions out loud from the group?
Yeah, Matt, I would like to ask a question. Basically, people talk about these days hacks for well-being, hacks for happiness, hacks for leadership. Are there some hacks for generating flow states?
I I try to stay away from hacks because I think it sort of diminishes. Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, I used to ask him about this, and he says the flow experience is so rich that like it can diminish it if we just try and think about like what are like quick hacks to do. But I think to I'll try and still answer the question without calling it hacks, but like there's for example, like instead of putting your phone face down when you're trying to focus on something, you have to have it out of sight. If you have it face down, you're still wondering what's on it. It's still distracting you. So like not being distracted by technology, it has to go completely out of sight. When you're meeting with someone virtually, remove every stimuli of distraction possible. And then I also hide my self view on Zoom. So I can't see myself. I'm self-conscious if I see myself. So that's one thing I do to be more focused on another person. So there's like a couple of small things that can hopefully help and not have technology be so as distracting.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. Do we have more time? Are we at time? Do we have another minute or two?
We can, yes. We can take a few more questions.
Okay. Is there isn't much one can do for the burnout. How do they still experience flow? Ankita, do you mind saying? I'm a little confused about the question.
Yeah, right. So first of all, thank you so much for amazing session. Early morning for me,
Thank you.
and I have a class in couple of minutes, and therefore, it's coming from a personal experience that when your day schedule doesn't really allow you space where you can just remove distraction and try to have that space, is there some way we can still try, despite having all the distractions, do something so that you are there in the flow experience for some period of time? How do we work with distractions instead of removing them? That's what I was trying to understand.
Do you mean like technology distraction or just all distractions in general?
I think all distraction, it's not only technology distracting. At times, there are work demands, there are people waiting to meet you, there is some other to-do list you have to finish. So it's not only technology that is distracting us. The life in general has become very distracting. And at times it's unavoidable. You can't just remove them. What do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, that's the life, of course. I think we all can relate to that. Thank you for the question. I would be trying to, I try and be like obsessive about the way I spend time throughout the day. So even with there's all these distractions, I would say instead of as I meant, I think I alluded to this in earlier, but when you have an hour that you want to work, be realistic about how much time you can actually devote to working right now, like on something. So let's say some of us might be like, I'm going to spend the next few hours on something, but realistically, there's too much distraction. We can't spend 3 hours on it. But maybe you can spend an hour. And then within that hour, be extremely intentional about what's the one or two things that I will be working on in this hour, or I will have complete in this hour. That way, you become so focused and it feels so urgent in the way you've structured it. I have 1 hour to complete these one or two things, that the distractions that might be coming, there's almost going to be like a blocker around you or a shield around you in many cases, because your brain will feel that what you're working on is so urgent that you'll be fully locked in and immersed in it. So it's a thing, it's not going to be perfect, but try and create shorter term blocks and very, very, very clear outcomes can be helpful to try to block out some of it.
Yes, I realized that when you were explaining earlier, but I probably have a follow-up question. I'll try to be quick. Uh, how do you handle when you already have, so with distractions, with all the to do to finish, there is also this decision fatigue, and maintaining this intentionality to create this experience or to have that time for yourself, this becomes like another decision to make, and you do not have that mental energy. Is there some way around that?
So this gets into a little bit of like habits for habit forming, where when we're starting a process of having more flow in our lives, there are a lot of decisions you need to make. But ultimately, where we want to be at is that every day we've structured the habits of our life in a way that like we don't have to be thinking about it so actively. Like, for example, let's say once you've established what your flow rituals are, I wake up, I meditate, I have my cup of coffee, I do this, I walk, I work out, I exercise, whatever it might be. You're not thinking about it every day. You've already decided what are the smaller things you can do in your day to have more flow. And then that's just part of your routine and your habits from then on, as opposed to always be actively thinking. So it starts with intentionality and making decision making, but then it becomes a habit.
Exactly. Thank you so much. That's exactly what I was thinking about, that probably flow need not be a decision to make, an experience to have. We can sort of make it automatized for ourselves in our experiences. And that takes time to create that habit, to make it automatic for us, not experience itself, but creating a situation where we can experience it. Thank you so much. I was looking something like that. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you're so welcome. Okay, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time.
Yes, I think we can move towards closing now. Thank you, Dr. Matt, for taking us through this insightful session. I'll request Rhythm Makkar from AIMS to offer the official vote of thanks.
Hello
Okay.
everyone, I'm Rhythm from AIMS New Delhi, India. On behalf of everyone attending, I extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Matt Dubin for this evidence-based and engaging session on Flow 2.0. Dr. Dubin, your talk on bridging the gap between what work is and what it could be reminds us that workplaces can be more than just a means to an end. They can be spaces for growth, challenge, but also connection and fulfillment. You shared with us rich research on different aspects of flow, its preconditions to the role of personality, how our work environment influences it, and also the pros and cons of using AI, all of which can help us make better choices in the future to access this state of mind more meaningfully, be it individually or in a group. Thank you for sharing your vision and inspiring us to approach work with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. It has truly been a privilege to learn from your expertise today. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much. And I think you can join your kids and sleep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, one and all. Bye-bye.